Hi, and welcome back to Old School. Today, our teacher is going to be Beth McCord. She has been in the Enneagram space for a while now as a coach and has now written a book for moms called The Enneagram for Moms. And for those of you who don't know what the Enneagram is, we're going to drill down on that. So you need to watch and so you can find out. She has been a speaker and a coach for a while now for that exact mentoring to understand the Enneagram and all of its components. And it is intricate, so it's not something we covered the whole gamut while we were sitting here for a half hour, 45 minutes. But we give you enough of a taste to make it intriguing to go pick up her book and listen to the rest of the podcast, and then go get her book and see what's going on there and what it all has to say. She has been on a mission to create a Your Enneagram community, and we talked so wonderfully about her own marriage. She got married very young, and her two kids, and some of the things that they've walked through together in regard to all of this. So we had a really great conversation that I just can't imagine, even if you haven't had kids yet. Understanding yourself in the Enneagram is something you would do regardless of being a parent or a mom. But getting to understand that going forward for the sake of your children, your marriage, for your other relationships, there's just no downside to it. So today we're going to have a great conversation and do a little bit of picking around and drilling down on it, and I think you're going to enjoy Beth. So let's welcome to class Beth McCord. So I'm so fascinated, and I can't wait to hear. What I like to start with here at Old School is people's story. I want to understand what got us to this point where you and I are going to chat about your book. The Enneagram for Moms, just so people know that's what we're here for. But I would like to know your faith journey that led you to the Enneagram in the first place.
Sure. Sounds good. Oh, right now?
Yeah.
Yep. Well, the way you set it up, I was like, oh, okay, yeah, we'll talk about that. Yeah. So, I got married at 20 and we had both our kids by the age of 25. So I was pretty young. And, Jeff and I were best friends, but we had turbulence. It's like we couldn't understand each other, just like most marriages.
Right.
But we were so young, it's kind of hard to really know yourself very well. And so he was in seminary full time, and we had some friends that had a counselor who introduced them to the Enneagram. And so he introduced us to the Enneagram and gave us a book. And Jeff kind of perused it, but he had lots of other things to read. So I took a look at it and I dove headlong into it, which isn't quite me. I'm not a big reader, but I found my type right away. I'm the peaceful accommodator, the type 9. And I just couldn't believe how much it brought in astonishing clarity to why I thought, felt, and behaved in my particular ways. And that astonishing clarity then helped me to explain to Jeff what was going on internally. And for the type 9s, we kind of live with this internal fog because our whole life we're trying to keep the peace. So we usually go along to get along. We try to make others happy. Well, by doing that, you kind of lose your own self in the process. So there was real reason why I didn't know myself and I couldn't explain myself. So I finally had this tool that made total sense to me. And then it gave me words and understanding to then share with Jeff. And that really helped our marriage, even at such a young age, to communicate better, to have empathy, grace, compassion, and all these other things. And I just got really interested in it and started using it. But the interesting thing is that a lot of times the Enneagram has been used in other worldviews, different faith views. And so it really wasn't at that time. There was one book on the Enneagram from a Christian perspective, but it was really hard to read. So I was like, I would love to explore, okay, how would we view it from a Christian perspective? Well, since Jeff was in seminary, I would get really interested on a topic, but they would have weird words in it that didn't make sense for, what we were used to. So I would say, hey, this is what they're saying. How would we see that from a Christian worldview? And he was like, oh, it'd be like this. And I'm like, oh yeah, that totally makes sense. So we basically did that for years. And then as he was an assistant pastor and worked with couples and families in the church, he could see how much it was helping us. And so he wanted to help other marriages. So we started using it with just a few couples in the church, and then they were experiencing great change and healing. So then we just started using it more and more. So that was kind of the beginning. That was about 2008 when we were starting to use it in that way. And we just saw a lot of growth. And then there's a lot between then and 2016, but 2016 is when I started my own coaching business. I had already gotten certified. And I thought, you know what? I really want to share all the things that I've learned with other people, but from a Christian perspective, because it meant so much to me to really understand my identity in Christ, but also then how people can use this tool to improve their relationship with him as well. So that's kind of, a little bit of the backstory of why I got into it and why I still love using it.
That's awesome. And I love how you were talking, like when you guys first got married so young. It's so funny how you'll hear people say things like they got divorced because they changed and they were like 50 years old. And I'm like, so you seriously didn't expect your spouse to change from the time you got married at 25 to 50 at all? You know, I mean, I would think that the divorce should hinge on the fact that you didn't. Like, come on, we got to grow in who we are. And I think sometimes, at least when I studied my results for the Enneagram, it does, like, the wings allow you to see where some of that can come into play too, because we can't help but grow. And then as you grow, the underlying ways that you have been conducting yourself start to improve. So now you're no longer the underlying part of an enthusiastic visionary like me. You're now moving, maybe a little out. And it is really, you're right, very interesting. And I do like it from a faith worldview, but you're right. I kind of drilled down after I got my results and was looking around, and even where Ian says he originally heard the foundations of it being in a different faith and stuff, but really fascinating. So how fun for you. So we fast forward to now. And when did the idea for Enneagrams for Moms come in?
Yeah, well, it actually originated, I can still see myself in the kitchen back in Normal, Illinois. That's where we used to live. We're in Nashville now.
Normal.
And my kids, in Normal, it is totally normal. And I can still see my kids being, like 8 or 10 years old. They're now 23 and 25. So it's a while ago, but I remember, so when I started using the Enneagram, they were 1 and 3. So at that point, I've been using it for quite a while. Just more personally, a little bit, like with the people in the church, but just personally as a mom. And I really wanted to help other moms, but I knew I was in no real position at the time to do anything with it. Like, I was just a stay-at-home mom, which is great, but I didn't have what I have now, like a platform to write and stuff. So it really came out of that season. And that season, as I was a mom, there were so many things that I got tripped up on that the rest of us moms do. Now, each of the 9 types are going to get tripped up in their own way. But in similar ways, but different ways and for different reasons. For me, I remember, going out on the playground when my kids were little, and I would see all of these moms, and I was like, oh, Jane, she is so creative with her kids. Oh, I wish I could be like that. Or Susan, she's so strong and good leader. And then, I'd see someone else and they'd have all these great qualities, and I'd come home and just kind of really feel like I'm just not a great mom. Like, all these other moms are just so fantastic. And Jeff just looked at me. He said, Beth, I think what you're doing is when you're on the playground, one, they're putting on their best, front, and he's like, and you're taking their best qualities and you're making one big superwoman, as if you should be all of that in one person. And that's just not who we are. That's not how we've been created. And he said, plus, you don't know what they're dealing with behind their closed doors. And I was like, you're really right. And I didn't, I don't think a lot of us realize that we're doing that. We just think I should be like this. I should be like that, and I'm not enough and I'm a terrible mom, because and I was like, I wanted to write to that mom, which is really me. I wanted to write to the moms out there that they don't feel like they're good enough. They feel like they're missing stuff. And I want to show them how God created them to be them with their personality type for their kiddos. It's not for someone else's kiddos. If God wanted those other kiddos to be theirs, they would be.
Right.
But he designed them with the gifts he gave them to be their parent. And he is not surprised by the weaknesses that come up. Yes, he created us to be not in the fall, but he knows we are in the fall. Like we have issues, we have liabilities, we have weaknesses. He's not surprised and he can take great care of us. What we need to do is be able to understand what our personality is like when we're at our healthiest, which means we're really radiating God's character. But then when we also become less healthy, more in the autopilot range, and what's our personality like when we're really unhealthy? And the reason why that's so important is because when you take that from a Christian faith-based perspective, what you realize is I am always secure and loved by Christ. My relationship status is perfect in him because of him. Though my heart and my mind will often wander away, but my relationship status stays the same. But how I go about my life changes. And so the overflow of my heart is going to show what's going on. So if I'm, struggling, it's like, oh, there I am again. But most of the time as humans, not just moms, when we know that we're struggling, we usually go in a shame cycle. And then especially when people look at the Enneagram and they see the not so great parts of their personality, it's like that's all they can see. And like, oh, I'm the worst. And I just want to say there is so much freedom here because if you're able to know, believe, and trust that you are safe and secure in your identity in Christ, and that's because of him, not because you pulled up your bootstraps and you figured it out, then, okay, so if that's secure and I am unconditionally loved and cared for and redeemed, then when I see I'm not doing as well, I get to see it, recognize it, own it, and then give it back to him and say, I'm sorry, and let him do the work in and through us. And he's the one that brings us up the levels of health. Now, it's not that we're sitting back and not doing anything, but we're participating with him. And so this is really important because all of us tend to go into that shame spiral when we don't need to go there. All the judgment has been taken care of. All the victory is his. We get to participate now in a whole new way. And so the Enneagram is going to let you know when you're struggling. So think of it like a rumble strip on the highway, So you're just driving down, all of a sudden you get kind of an autopilot, you're zoning out and you hit that rumble strip. The Enneagram is going to let you know, hey, when you do this, that's actually not healthy. I know you've done it forever. You think this is normal, but it's not. And if you keep going in that direction, you're going to land in the same pitfall that you always land into, which we do. And then, we throw up our hands like, how did I get here?
How did this happen?
Haven't I learned my lesson? Don't I know better? I do this all the time. And again, the shame spiral. But if we're able to use the Enneagram to use that rumble strip as an alert system, not a shaming system, then we can go, oh, that's what's going on right now. But I'm okay because I'm okay in him, but I do need to recognize this. And I would like to get back into the healthiest path for my personality type, not someone else's, mine. What is he calling me to do? And so then we get to make that option like a real path. And so that's why the Enneagram is so dynamic. It helps us to know when we're veering off course, but how to lean back on the truth to get us back to where we're supposed to be, which is being more like him.
What I love about it too is the way it's phrased, that it is not about pigeonholing us as a certain personality. It talks more about from where we're coming from in that personality. From what basis are we making these decisions and these choices in the way that we conduct ourselves. I really love that. And you're right. When I read the stuff that's not so pretty. But if we don't, it's like, all these famous people out there on social media and in the world who are like self-help gurus and who get you all fired up. Well, you can't change what you don't acknowledge. Right. And God can do anything, but what he wants to do is work with us in that. Like you said, he created us this way. And then when we come to this place where we're doing something that we know is not necessarily our most shining moment, okay, we have to work with him to let go of that
Yeah.
before, we can take up the changes to come. So I love that. And that is one of the things I like about it a lot. Okay, so this is for moms, but in the
Yeah.
book, you also talk about how to tell your child's Enneagram as well. So, like,
Yes and no, but go
I
ahead.
mean, kind of, I guess more the Enneagram of parents, but for the sake of being able to
Right.
create that communication, that
Yes.
parenting style. There we go. So for people who don't know, I
Mhm.
think feels like the world ought to know, but the kind of a high flying view of the nine.
Yeah, the nine types. So again, the Enneagram, we talked about Myers-Briggs a second ago. Those other personalities are showing you what you do. The Enneagram tells you why you think, feel, and behave. And it's based off of the core motivations for your Enneagram type. There's 4 core motivations. So there's the core fear, what you're running away from, the core desire, what you're trying to obtain, the core weakness. This is your Achilles heel, the thorn in your side, the thing that keeps tripping you up all the time. And then you have a core longing, the message your heart longs to hear. So those are the basis. And I'm not going to go over all of it because it would just take us, a little bit too long
Right.
to cover everything. But people can go download a free PDF and I have all the 9 types and their core motivations on it. It's yourenneagramcoach.com/core motivations. So the type 1 is the principled reformer. They fear being bad, evil, corruptible, and wrong. They desire to be good, ethical, moral, and right. The type 2 is the nurturing supporter. They fear being rejected, worthless, dispensable, unappreciated. They desire to be loved, wanted, and appreciated. The type 3 is the admirable achiever. They fear being a failure, incompetent, worthless, being exposed. And now their core desire is to be successful, admirable, achieving. It said successful, and to have high status and high regard. The type 4 is the introspective individualist. They fear being plain, mundane, and just like everybody else. What they long for, excuse me, is to be their most authentic self, to be unique, special, and different. The type 5 is the analytical investigator. They fear being ignorant, incompetent, unknowledgeable. They desire to have wisdom, insight, intellect, and to be capable and competent. The type 6 is the faithful guardian. They fear itself, being targeted, blamed. They fear not having guidance and support and security. And really, what they desire is that security, guidance, and support. The type 8 is the passionate, I'm sorry, type 7. I almost dropped you off. Type 7, they fear being trapped in emotional pain, boredom, restricted, and definitely missing out on something fun, the true FOMOs of the world. And they desire to be happy, satisfied, and fully content. The type 8 is the passionate protector, and they fear being controlled, manipulated, and at the mercy of injustice. And they desire to protect themselves and those in their small inner circle. And last but not least is my type, the peaceful accommodator. And we fear conflict, tension of any kind, being loveless, overlooked. And we desire to have an inner stability and a peace of mind and harmony. So those are quickly the 9 types, and I didn't go through all of their core motivations. So if you were to see all of them, it starts to make even more sense.
Sure.
But that's just a really high overview of the 9 types.
Well, and I think a lot of people don't understand. And then when you see pictures like in passing, everybody's like, "What is that?" It's almost like the pentagram and this and
Right.
that. And so having just a basic understanding, and yeah, we definitely don't want to give away the farm. They can go get your book, and we will
Yeah.
have all your connection stuff in the show notes. But yeah, it was so fascinating to me. Just even, I mean, because when he came to speak at our church too to talk about it, you can't in that period of time drill down that much without having people's eyes glaze over too. You want to, you got to take your time with stuff and
Yeah.
really understand. And it is, I can say unequivocally that that test was interesting for those of
Yeah.
us who tend to be a little skeptical, that think something's going to analyze us and put us somewhere that we don't want to be. It's not like that at all. So
Right.
fascinating. The wings and all of that. And I know you go into all of those things, but the 6 and 8 couldn't be more like there are times when I probably even operate more in those than I do
Yeah.
in my 7, because of the layers of abuse I went through as a child. And the Lord created me even at 2 to realize and begin the mechanisms of how to understand and reconcile what was going on around me. So it
Yeah.
is so fascinating how it all kind of comes back together to literally, like you said, those core motivations and those things that are come along with my title.
Yeah. Yeah. And, the people that are listening, think of it as all wearing sunglasses with different colored lenses. So you have a red lens, I have a purple lens, and we've been seeing the world through our lens our entire life. And we think everyone else sees through the same lens, but we don't. We see it differently. We interpret it differently, and then we react to it differently, which is why we always go, why did they do that? Or why did they think this? Like I would never, and because there are 9 valid ways of seeing, interpreting, and reacting to the world. Now, the question is, was it from a healthy place, a average place, or an unhealthy place? And so my goal is to help everyone to become the healthiest version of themselves, because when they're at their healthiest, not only are they enjoying everything, but everyone else around them are benefiting from how God created them. And so that's really where we want people to shine, because there's nothing bad about your personality type until we get into the unhealthy places. And then we're living out the negative qualities. But man, every one of the 9 types at their healthiest is truly remarkable. And I love being around healthy people of their type, because it just sings the radiance of God in a unique way.
Well, and I think it's so interesting when you were talking about like with married couples and stuff too, that we have these expectations. And like you said, we are looking at the world our way, and we cannot comprehend why somebody else doesn't. And understanding where somebody else's motivations come from, even if you don't agree with them or you don't
Right.
understand them
Yeah.
completely, wouldn't that, I mean, I think that ought to be taught in premarital counseling.
Oh,
Um,
absolutely. Because really what it's doing is, like, if you and I were, let's say, co-workers together as a type 9 and a type 7, there's going to be a lot of things that we're going to have fun with. I'm much more like, hey, I'll go along to get along. You're like, great, because like, let's go have fun over here. And I'm like, sounds great. And so that works really well together. But also the 7 is constantly on the move, and 9s like to chill and relax. And so there would be then some tension there.
right.
If you're constantly wanting to go, you're going to be like, why are you not moving fast enough? And I'm thinking, why can't you just slow down and just relax? Right.
Chill out.
So, but what we can do, whether it's friends, coworkers, parents to children, spouses, if we can just take off our lens for just a second, put on someone else's lens, then we have the aha moment, right? It's like, I see why you see, interpret, and react to the world the way you do. But so it brings understanding, it brings compassion, empathy, but it also helps us to then relate to one another in a new way. Like you said, it doesn't mean that I agree. Like I would not enjoy going at the pace of a 7, but that doesn't make a 7 bad or wrong in and of itself, right? And a 9 that likes to chill and relax isn't bad or right in and of itself. But how would we navigate that? Maybe it's a little give and take. And sometimes it's like, you know what, Michele, I think you're just going to have to go and have some fun, or find some other friends that like to go at that speed. And I'll ride along every once in a while, but I just don't want to do it that pace. And then there's times where you're going to be like, you know what, I do need to dial it back and rest. I just can't do it as much as you like to do it, Beth.
Right.
And so there's that understanding, that compromise. And that's, again, taking off our lens for just a second and putting on someone else's lens, just so that we can meet each other midway.
I belong to different groups, and especially as we've gone through church and stuff. And it's funny to hear when, like, if there's 5 or 6 of you and a couple can't agree on something that everyone wants to do, and they're incredulous. And I'm like, why? You're married, right? When you go home, do you and your husband agree on everything? And it's not a bad thing to disagree. I mean,
Right.
should you have addressed some of it before you got married? Maybe. But like things like what movie you're going to go see, or things like you said, the speed at which, or whatever you're going to go do. And the Enneagram makes perfect sense in that regard, that We need to be able to understand and acknowledge that everybody, I mean, there's 8 billion people on the planet. And maybe, okay, there's 9 slots with varying wings and degrees. But the fact of the matter is all 8 billion are not identical.
Oh,
And so
no.
we're going, finding people in your area. And even if I found like other sevens, I think the complementary Enneagram is better because other sevens and I are going to we're going to pull each other apart.
Yeah. Yeah. You're going to all have your great ideas, but
And
yeah,
I have
you're
to
right.
do mine.
Well, think about like when you go into Sherman-Williams, let's say there was only 9 basic colors, but even if you're picking blue, there are a
10,000
billion different
blues.
color blues, right? And that's really what we are like. We all have been created maybe with the same core motivations, but then we have our own story, our own talents, our own desires. Like there's so much more about a human being than just the Enneagram type. The Enneagram type just helps us to see why we do what we do, and then to help keep our heart, in that place that's healthy versus unhealthy.
And so this is for moms. So in regard to the parenting like thread that's getting pulled through. So are you showing them a little more about how they can look at their children and understand where they're coming from? Or are you having them just get in touch with their own way of operating?
Yeah, it's a little bit of both, but majority of it is really focused on them. And so I tell moms, I'm like, this is the book you need. It's not the book you really want. Meaning, I get it. I wanted from day one the manual for my little Nate and my little Libby. Like, just tell me how to parent these two. And that God just doesn't give that to us because we can't actually type our kids. They have to tell us their type. And that's not until at least their teenage years. Because most kids, they have their type. I believe we're born our type, but they're also learning from their parents. So they're kind of like, oh, trying this and I'm trying that. My coaches. And so it's not that their personality is changing. They're just trying to learn how to live in life. But then as those teen years come up, all parents kind of experience this where they're like, wait a second, you haven't been like this your whole life. Where is this coming from? And it's
What
like,
happened to the one that wanted to cuddle me?
exactly. And it's like, oh, the personality is kind of like, no, I'm going to be me now. And that's hard for parents and people just to kind of size on. But if the parent starts to be curious in those years and help them to learn things like the Enneagram or other person, like, hey, let's discover you. I want to be able to help you be the best version that you are. Then kids are usually pretty interested, but you can't type your kid because nobody knows why you do what you do. Right. Think about 9 homes that are exactly identical, owned by all the 9 types, and you walk in, they're all perfectly clean. They look exactly the same. Well, each of the 9 types might do the same thing, have a perfectly clean home, but for different reasons. The type 1 is going to do it because it's the right thing to do. The type 2 because it's a warm hug. The 3 because it's all about image. The 4 because it's about their aesthetics, the design. The type 5 because they want to keep all of their intellect resources easily accessible. The 6, they want to make sure everything is okay so no one gets sick or harmed. The type 7, you're going to want to have it clean so that you can go off to the next fun thing. It doesn't keep you tied down. The 7 or the 8 doesn't want the house to control them. They're going to control the house. And I, as a 9, I just want to chill and relax. I don't want the house screaming at me that there's all this work to be done. So it's important that moms realize that the Enneagram is not about the behavior. It's about the why. And so with our kids, it's the same thing. All kids can lie. All kids can talk back. All kids can have messy rooms. But why? And we can't know the why until they're old enough for them to know it and then to find their type. But we can be curious. And so the whole book is really majority focused on moms knowing themselves, because even if you have 9 kids and you have all the 9 types, the best gift that you can give your kid is to know yourself and to unpack your own story in a healthy way, and then have self-regulation and curiosity and be a non-anxious present parent in where your kids are at. And so that's what we're really helping our moms to be, is we want you to be the best, healthiest version of yourself, because it doesn't matter what anyone else is like, because everyone has to take care of themselves. Yes, we want to parent, we want to guide, all those things. But if we know ourselves, then we can parent in a whole new way. And I have, if you're interested, I have a couple stories that would help explain why doing it for yourself is such a great model for your kids, no matter what type they are.
Absolutely. If you'd like to share one, you're more than welcome to.
Yeah. So like I said, I got to know the Enneagram when my kids were 1 and 3, and I used it the whole time. One thing I think I did right, I didn't do a lot of things right. We all have our things, but one thing I did right was I didn't use the word Enneagram or the lingo of the Enneagram very much until they were a little bit older, because then they can get annoyed. Oh, the Enneagram this, mom.
Yeah.
But if you use like other normal words, and I'm helping them to learn how to know themselves on a deeper emotional level, if I start with myself first, then they will learn how to model that. So I did that all along, and I let them know, hey, mom, her false record message that's in my head. And then sometimes I would tell them about the Enneagram. So mom's Enneagram type, the false messages in her mind says, I'm not important. My voice doesn't matter. No one cares about what I have to think. And I let them know those are false messages, but it really feels real. And so sometimes when mom gets irritated or upset, it's because those messages really feel real in the moment. And I have to remind myself that that's false. So fast forward, now they're teenagers and it's the summer break. So they're 15 and 17, and I can hear them downstairs hooting and hollering, playing video games together, which, for my type 9 heart, I'm like, oh, they're connecting. There's like this peace and harmony, like everything's going well. Yay. Well, then I come down the stairs mid-morning and the kitchen's a disaster. So there's part of me that's like, okay, calm down. I can just ask for them to take care of it. And I did. And they're like, yeah, sure, no problem. I'm like, okay, I'm going to go upstairs. I'm going to work for a while. And so when I come back down, I'd really like it to be cleaned. Sure, mom, no problem. So I go upstairs and I work. And of course, I come down and guess what? Yes, we all know they're still playing their video games and nothing's been touched. Now, this is the moment where everything can change, because when I see the kitchen for the first time, I'm activated. So my core motivations, I feel like I'm being overlooked. That's a core fear of mine. I don't think my presence matters. My false messages are rearing up and I want to explode, because I'm hurt. I feel disrespected. But that's my rumble strip. I know that when those messages pop up, they're probably actually not true. It's probably not what actually is going on. And we often commit a suicide where we assume incorrectly other people's thoughts, feelings, and motives, and we react on those assumptions when it might not even be true. So I've got these false messages. I realize I'm on that rumble strip, and I have a decision to make. What am I going to do with this? Am I just going to keep going past the rumble strip and get mad at them and not ask curious questions because I, quote unquote, know why they did it? Or am I going to take a different path? And am I going to ask them curious questions? Let them know how I feel kind of hurt and overlooked, but see what went on. Like, why didn't they do it? And that's the path I chose this time. Don't get me wrong. I have lots of different moments.
No perfection over here.
Yeah, no perfection over here. But I wanted to give an example of when we take the time to be aware of ourselves, hear the rumble strip, and then rely on the Holy Spirit to course correct. Then, so I said to my kids, of course, I'm wanting to get really angry. Hey guys, didn't I ask you to get the kitchen done? What's going on? And of course, they were still playing the video games, probably hadn't moved an inch. And they're like, oh my gosh, mom, so sorry. And then they came into the kitchen and they're like, okay, mom, we totally know that you probably feel overlooked. You probably feel like your voice doesn't matter. You don't matter, that we don't love you. Totally get it. Because, as a type 9, I can see why you would feel that way. But that's not our intentions at all. We just got stuck playing video games and that's our bad. We'll go clean it right now. And I was just flabbergasted, like, what just happened? Like, is this really true? And it was that moment where I'm like, this matters. The work I do within myself and model for my kids actually really matters. It's not that I'm telling my kids that they have to talk this way. I model it for them. And so in that moment, I realized they've heard me over the years where I have my own hiccups, my own false messages, not blaming them for it. That's my own work to do, but that their behaviors can keep on and make it harder for me to not hear those false messages. And I have to work even harder to not think those are real. But what they did in that moment, they acknowledged that their behavior would have been contributing to that false message and that they were sorry. So they were repairing with me. But that was because all these years we've been trying to model that and repair with them, to talk to them about, like, Nate's a type 6. So it's like, hey, Nate, I know that you probably feel insecure right now because of this, that, and the other. We're really sorry. You are safe and secure. We're going to make these different things happen. Or Libby, you are wanted and loved. You don't have to help and serve. I know that it sometimes comes across like that with mom, but I'm really sorry. I totally love you unconditionally. So we're talking, once we know their type, we're talking to them more specifically in the language that makes sense to them, to their heart. And that's what they were doing with me that day. And it meant so much to me that they actually saw me for me and loved me the way I needed to hear it. And so, like I said, we're like, my kids are 25 and 23. We're still working this out. It's a once and done thing. It's a forever lifetime, but we have the language to meet each other where they're at, where I'm at, instead of trying to force people into our own personality boxes. That's what's usually happening, is we're trying to pigeonhole people the way we want it instead of being curious about who God created them to be. So the book is really focused around moms knowing their own story, unpacking their story, helping to heal their story from their personality type. And then I unpack their personality type in a longer form. At the back of the book, we do talk about the kids. We do talk about what it's like to be their type and things to look out for. And then the very back of the book, we talk about the dance. What is it like when two Enneagram types come together? So like you and me, as an example, you're wanting to go, 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 go. And I'm like, I want to accommodate. I want to people please, but I also don't. And so where does that rub come in, which is the dance? And how do I recognize what your dance is and what my dance is? What's your responsibility and what's my responsibility? And so we talk about that. And not only will that help you with all your relationships, but also with your relationship with your kids. And so it just gives these really great tools to have in your tool belt. So you can just kind of pull them out at any time you need. They're quick, they're easy, they're practical, they're relatable right away. So that's really what the book is about and why I wrote it.
Well, and how awesome, as you were talking about them speaking to you, because I think every parent, if somebody said they didn't, I would think they're not being truthful. Every parent has had that moment where you're ready to just, burst out,
Unleash.
vomit all over them. And the catastrophic damage that does,
Yep.
and what has to happen for you to even get them back to square one, where you might be able to have a viable conversation and they trust you, not to just dump on them again. Being able to just be aware of that. And I know how I feel after I do go ahead and unleash.
Yes.
And it's horrible. It is horrible. It is over dishes or a room or a whatever. I would just as soon burn the house down, as opposed to doing that, how badly that feels. So I think that is awesome, that if people can find, themselves and get themselves to that healthy place, that I think that's the only way we can operate with each other, no matter what mechanism we use. I mean, if we are unhealthy things are going to just be getting poured into the people around you. It's just, as the buzzword these days, it's just toxic. It's just not healthy.
Yeah.
Well, that's awesome. I love every bit of it. I'm going to take a look at it. I haven't yet been able, my daughter's 23. I have her old. I'm 61. But she does live with me, and we do have communication stuff. She is
we all have a dance.
Yeah.
Whether it's a healthy dance in the moment or a not so healthy dance, like, it's going to flux. And so that's perfectly fine. That's just the way relationships are. But if we recognize what's going on under the hood, those core motivations, what's getting activated, we can then bring back the truth, which is, especially gospel truth, reorient our heart and try in a whole new, healthier way. So, and it's not easy. None of this is easy, but it's worth it. Now, one thing I will say, because you mentioned it earlier, is yeah, you know what? We do make big mistakes, but it's never too late to start repairing. And we do cover that in the book. What does real repair look like? And then that again, if we do those steps of repair with our kids, then they're going to learn what real repair looks like back towards us and what it looks like with their spouses, their bosses, their friends, their children. And so that's another important piece of the book because even I think when anyone gets hurt by someone and they truly try their best to repair, not that it will ever get back to the way it was, it may not for some relationships, but reconciliation and restoring the relationship is so important. I mean, that's really why Christ came, was to repair, to reconcile us. And so it is a big part of our relationships with our family for sure.
It's funny. I went on a cruise. It itself wasn't a singles cruise, but I'm in a online singles group here in Arizona, and 30 of us went on a cruise. And they asked me if I would lead the devotion in the morning when we were like out to sea and didn't need to get somewhere or whatever. Well, we ended up having it every day, and they asked me to lead it every day. But the first day, I talked about restoration and how, there's the biblical definition and there's the world Merriam-Webster definition, and how both of them get to the point of going back to its original state, but the Bible takes it just a tad further, going back to an even better than its original state. And that is what Christ does for us. And I honestly believe that can happen in the relationships that we have. And I think a lot of times what we need to do is exactly what you're saying, is stop looking at why they're not doing what I want them to do.
Yeah.
And realize
exactly.
we're looking at this from a different angle. Like the old saying that if three people were asked about an accident on a street corner, all three are going to give you a different story.
Yep, that's absolutely right.
So one thing I do with all of my guests is ask them at the end for their nugget, for the one thing they wish that somebody had either told them or that they had heard or discovered sooner.
Yeah, I think for me, when I was younger, what I really needed to hear was you're beloved no matter what. Like Christ saved you. He took away your sins, but he also put his righteousness on you so that from this point forward, you're always his beloved. That doesn't change even when you have your bad days. You can always come back to that reference point because that's who you are and that's what he sees in you. And I think that would have just calmed a lot of my anxiety and fears down and shame that, yeah, I do make mistakes, but there is no more condemnation anymore. I get to rest in his arms and in his work. And I think, not that to say that, of course, I will have all those feelings as anxieties and shame, those will pop up, but I think I would have had a softer place and a more secure place to land. So I would say for me, you're his beloved, just rest in that.
Yeah. I love those kind of terms, like in the Song of Solomon. I know he's talking about it, but he is talking about that relationship and how we're his beloved, and how in the Bible he talks about us being the apple of his eye, and just all of those things. Because like my experiences as a child, the people who were supposed to love me didn't, or were doing horrible things to me. So that created a dichotomy for me. So really hanging on to the one who is going to love us unconditionally and who does truly look at us as beloved is a very awesome nugget.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, this has been awesome, young lady.
Thank you so much.
I can't wait. When does the book come out?
July 9th.
July 9th. Okay.
Yep.
We will make sure this episode gets out there before that. We'll be a part of the parade if we need to. And it'll be awesome. I'll have all of your connection information and everything in the show notes, and we will just have a great time. And I'm looking forward to reading it myself, and I will reach out to you afterward.
Yeah. Thanks, Michele.
Okay, hon. You have a great day.
You too. Bye-bye.
I want to thank you all for coming to class. This has just been very interesting. I can't wait for her book to come out, The Enneagram for Moms, on July 9th. This episode will be out ahead of that, so that will make sense. And I want to thank you for coming here. If you like what's happening, if you can head on over to the platforms, rate, review, download, subscribe, and engage if you have something to say or some input about your Enneagram type and some of the things that we discussed. I would absolutely love that. All of her connection information will be in the show notes because she does have a coaching business and she has some great free giveaways and things from her website. So check us out, check out the show notes, have a listen and listen all the way through. And we're grateful that you are here. And thank you for coming to class. And class dismissed. This episode of Old School with Michele Vrabel is brought to you by The Lathered Crown, a hair and scalp spa here in the Phoenix area.